Right to the middle. Sit. Sit up, a little more up.
A little higher. He must be talking to me. And you refuse. And you refuse. In the middle. Tim, mostly you have to look down. Look down.
Mr. Robbins, 5 seconds left here. Sit. And higher. Mr. Robbins. More down. And again, sit. Higher. Sit. No more down. Higher. Down. How about after?
I don't know if you speak German.
So you photographers, please sit down so we can start the press conference. Please sit down.
Translation.
And during the press conference, please don't use the flashlights. Please sit down. You both, please.
I feel sorry for them. They have a hard life.
It's tough.
Was it like this in Brussels too?
Please sit down. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a welcome for today's press conference, screening and competition, Dead Man Walking, and let's have a welcome Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote the book, Dead Man Walking.
There it is.
And the director, Tim Robbins. Your questions, please.
Hello. I have a question for both of the people, for Mr. Robbins and for Sister Prejean. It's interesting to me that the ending of the film is not unlike the ending of Mel Gibson's Braveheart, with the protagonist stretched out on a cross before he's about to be executed. My question relates to the actual practice. If you could enlighten me as to whether the people in the audience were actually there, whether he delivered that speech, and whether they actually get to see him doing this thing.
Everything in that room is fact. The shape of that table is a direct copy of the table they used in Louisiana. The table is reclines that way. It's made out of the same material. Our designer, Richard Hoover, copied it directly from the Louisiana design. The machine is based on a machine in Missouri. The curtain is pulled back like that in Louisiana and in Texas. The people do witness the execution. The swab on the arm happens. The little sandwiches outside of the execution room happen. Everything in there is based in fact. I would never introduce any kind of correlation between Christ and Matthew Poncelet. As a matter of fact, wrote a scene in the movie where he tries to claim that he is just like Christ, and she says, absolutely not, you're not.
I was amazed when I went up to the set in New York and felt like I was entering onto the death row in Louisiana again, because they had done it so exactly. The whole part about a person saying their last words, being with people before they die, it is a big thing to think about what will be the last words that I say before I leave this earth. And those words were well thought out and very close actually to what one of the death row inmates I accompanied actually did say when he died. The Louisiana allows the victims' families to sit on the front row. They get to send a representative to watch the person die. And that was just exactly the way that the film was done. My touching him as he walked was true too. He said, Warden, can I ask you one question? Can Sister Helen touch my arm? All of that was just as it really happens.
My question is to Mr. Robbins. You had been made an exciting movie about the drama of deals with death execution, and don't you agree with such opinion that it is your vote for the discussion about to be or not to be the death persecution?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Can you? What the question?
It is for you. It is a drama, or it is a sort of your vote for in discussion. It's your opinion in discussion about to be or not to be the death persecution.
Well, you know, my main ambition with the movie was to reflect what's in the book. And what the book did for me was open the door into this world. And it was never my intention to deny anything in the book. And one of the things that's pretty special about the book is there's a lot of time and dignity and respect given to the victims' families as well. If anything, if the film can do anything, it's to open a door for an audience to look into.
Ja, bitte.
Hanne Schmidt aus Bonn.
Harold Schmidt from Bonn.
Ich versuche,
My name is Harold Schmidt from Bonn. Now,
gerecht zu werden.
I'm trying to be just in my assessment of this film. That's our job, after all.
Aber man denkt sofort
But
an
straight
den
away,
Polen Kieslowski,
you think of
eine
the
kurze
Polish
Geschichte,
Kieslowski
ein kurzer Film
and a
vom
short
Töten.
story and a short film
Der
about
Film ist
killing.
viel
The film
wortkarger,
is very much more
viel
sparse with its
sparsamer
words. It's very much more economical
quält uns nicht durch
and
einen
doesn't sort of
Realismus,
torture us
der
through a
bewundernswert
realism which
detailgetreu ist.
is admirably true to
Aber man
detail.
fragt sich,
But
will
you
der
can't help asking,
unvoreingenommener Kinobesucher
unprejudiced
das alles
cinema
so
goer,
genau
would that
wissen?
person really want to
Wobei ja
know
man
everything in
leicht
such detail?
der Illusion erliegt,
Because you're likely
es wäre
to
ein
be
Dokumentarfilm.
tempted to
Und ich
fall into the
bewundere
illusion that that's a
Ihre Mühe der
documentary.
Recherche
And
und
I
glaube es ja.
admire all the research that you've done, and I certainly
Aber
believe in
der
what
Film
you've
im
presented.
20. Jahrhundert
But
hat ja im
20th
Gegensatz
century
zum
cinema,
Theater
as opposed
nicht
to
die
the
Möglichkeit,
theatre,
auf einer
doesn't have the
anderen Stelle der Bühne
possibility
zu sehen.
of actually
Schmidt, darf ich
give us the
alle
opportunity of giving
Voyeurs
Could you put the question, says this person. You're turning us into voyeurs, people who are snooping, and we're more or less forced to watch this merciless camera. We're forced to go along with that camera and question, please, somebody's saying. Well, that's what all the shouting's about.
Aber eine Sache ist wichtig.
One thing is important.
Film wird zwei Diskussionen
This film will undoubtedly
anheizen.
provoke, or at least further two discussions, two debates. First of all, what the camera is allowed to do and what it isn't. It's an important question of aesthetics, and also, of course, the question of capital punishment or the death penalty.
What's the question?
What's the question?
Great speech.
Ich könnte doch hinzufügen,
I could add.
Sind Sie überzeugt davon, dass die
Are you sure?
Kamera
Are you convinced
das darf,
that
was
the
sie
camera
zeigt?
is supposed to be doing what you've shown here? Is that the job of a camera?
The job of film, the responsibility of people, I think, that make films, is to look unblinkingly at the truth. And if you cannot deal with the truth, don't do that kind of movie. And don't go see that kind of movie. But we have a situation in the United States where we accept blindly something that we do not want to look at, we don't want to see. And it's a life and death issue. And if we cannot look at it, then maybe perhaps it doesn't have any right to exist. So what we're doing is we're opening the door and trying to show honestly what happens. And if you can't make films like that, I'm personally not interested in making films.
Tim, this is for Tim and also for Sister. My feeling is that I'm over here. I'll keep going.
There you are. Hello.
My feeling is that, it's interesting how there are so many films. There have been 3 films that have come out recently that are dealing with the death penalty issue. And I'm wondering what your feeling is about the overview in society. In this obsession with death and the fact that our society is getting more violent, people is upset. I remember when Gary Gilmore was executed. It became a media circus. Everybody wanted to get a picture. Everybody wanted to get a camera crew down there. And I'm curious, what do you think is happening to our society as a whole? And I think it's getting almost on the edge of being kind of morbid. That we're so obsessed with like O.J. Simpson and on and on and on. And I also have a second question, but let's do this one first.
I want to say first, people are not obsessed with the death penalty in the United States. It's on page 30 of the newspapers now. It has to have a new hook to it for even a story to be done when people are executed. Like John Albert Taylor in Utah was shot. Okay, that got the media. They're not obsessed with the death penalty.
Right. No, I know.
Because it's an abstraction and it's a secret ritual. And I'd like to address my remarks to what the movie does for that. And also to tie into what the little speech question that preceded this about what the camera does. You see, the American public especially, I know this is for the rest of the world, but the death penalty is an abstraction. It's a secret ritual done in the middle of the night and maybe 12 people are there. What the film does, just like what good literature does, it takes you, excuse me.
Let's promote the book.
What hopefully a good story does is to give people a vicarious experience of being there, and that's why you bring out the details and the feelings and what the death house is like and what the victim's family says and what they go through, because it's the only way people have of getting there. We're not about to allow public executions in the United States because the death penalty would be abolished tomorrow if people really saw what was going on.
I'd also like to say that I wonder if you would address that question to a maker of an action-adventure film that has 100 deaths in it.
Well, that's part of why I asked that question.
Because we rarely deal with that, We rarely deal with those people at all. The fact that there's so many lives are being lost just so cavalierly, we don't care.
And the second question was, it's interesting how a few years ago, you guys went up and took a stand at the Academy Awards, and they said, "Oh, you'll never come back," and never. And of course, the following year, you were there once again, and now suddenly you're the toast of Hollywood. What's going on? Well, are these people not to be taken seriously? I mean, how do you feel about that?
I don't know. I don't think I'm the toast of Hollywood, I got to tell you.
You've all been nominated, all three of you. It's quite rare.
We were nominated by some peers in Hollywood. But that's a hard question to answer. I really don't know. I don't live there. I live in New York City, so I really don't.
You must have an opinion about it.
Opinion about what?
About the fact that 3 years ago, you were being reprimanded.
That was, you see, you got to understand, that wasn't Hollywood that was doing that. That was one television producer that said that to the media after the show. That was not Hollywood speaking. Don't give that guy too much power, guy.
A question for Mr. Sorry for you. Two very short.
Robbins.
I'm sorry for me too.
Tim Robbins. Sorry, I get mixed up with all these names for Tim Robbins. Please, two very short questions. First, are you yourself religious or Catholic?
I was raised a Catholic, and I am not a practicing Catholic right now. I don't go to church, but I do teach my children about Jesus Christ, and I think that I personally have a problem with organized religions that ask you to choose one God over another, and to say that our God is the only God to the exclusion of all other gods. Unfortunately, I think that kind of thinking leads to distrust, prejudice, and war, and I can't get behind a religion that uses God to inspire violence, whether it's Christianity or whatever.
Is the central message of the film that killing can never be allowed, no matter if it is a private issue or a state issue?
I think you got it.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Robbins.
Give him the prize over here, the prize.
Would you please look to the right side, Mr. Robbins? Here I am. Over here.
Hi.
Hi. My question is, could you tell us a little bit about how the work was with Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn, and why you chose those two actors to play in your movie?
Well, first of all, because Susan Sarandon is the best actress working right now.
You're here.
And Sean Penn is, I think, one of the best of his generation, probably the best. So, I didn't have to think much about that. If I could just use this opportunity to say how tremendous it was to work with both of them, and I think the work, the levels of reality that they've reached in this film are truly extraordinary and unprecedented in a way. And one thing that Susan does, which is really remarkable, is usually as an actor you have active scenes, you have stuff to throw, you have walls to bang your head against, you have tantrums, and this role didn't allow her any of that. What she had to be was the eyes of an audience, and as an actor I know this is the most difficult role to do. A lot of the showy roles where people are allowed to thrash around get a lot of attention, and I just want to call attention to that what she's doing is much harder than some of the other things that you see getting plaudits.
Sister Prejean, all my admiration for your immense courage in your work, and to work with Mr. Robbins too.
That didn't take courage.
My
I learned a lot.
Good. My question maybe to Mr. Robbins, maybe to both of you. There is a 1 second scene. Maybe I'm mistaken, but I think I saw the faces of the victims in the window of the witness booth. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. now my feeling, actually, I saw it on video first, as you know, and my feeling was then, I didn't see the scene when I saw it on video. My feeling was first that you avoided anything that came to an eye for an eye, because you don't believe in that. Now, making the faces of the victims appear in that witness booth of the execution chamber is eye for an eye, isn't it? Or what was the idea behind it? I
Not
didn't get it.
necessarily. I don't believe not necessarily. The idea behind that was, the idea that there's souls watching. And it's a very brief and subtle thing, but it's the idea that, I don't particularly see them grinning or feeling good about what's happening. It's just part of the tragedy, really. Here's another death. That for me is all it represented.
Yeah, but Matthew Punsley isn't a real character. I mean, how much freedom did you feel you had to invent about the life of the sister? Because she's real, and I mean, there is a sort of conflict between the reality and the fiction, isn't there?
Well, first of all, Helen and I talked a lot about what was going to be done. And I ran everything by her. Ran all the drafts by her, everything that we, any combinations of characters or condensation of time was run past her. I personally would not mess with a nun.
It's that Catholic training.
Yeah, but for the sake of storytelling, you have to condense. You have to, they don't allow us to do 5-hour films. Contractually, I had to be under 2 hours, and in order to do it in under 2 hours, you have to, combine characters and take some liberties.
My question is to Sister Helen. How did you like the acting by Susan Sarandon yourself?
Well, when I first saw Susan come onto the set, the very first day of shooting, it was with the murder victim's family, this little house in Slidell, remember, Tim, the very first day. And what would happen to me is I would be watching Susan, who's being me, but I would get sucked right into the original scene because the opening day of shooting was the murder victims telling the story about their daughter being killed. So I kept experiencing Susan as a window more than a mirror of myself. And I just talked to her a couple of nights ago, and as the responses are coming back of the film and people are being so touched by it, I said, Susan, she really stripped herself down to do this role. I mean, almost no makeup. If she called it a bad haircut, I call it a low-maintenance haircut. It was like she was really stripped down in the way she dressed and the way she looked. And I said to her, and I think it's true, like, you really became the moral force in this film because it was not just simply her being me, but I think who she is really comes through, like the essence of who she is as a person comes through in this film. And I find she's really the moral guide and the moral compass for the audience. I was very pleased at the way that she did it. And I think she gives it a life of her own. Yeah, she was me on one level, but in another level, it's Susan Sarandon who plays this role and gives it a life of her own.
Hello, I'm here.
Hi.
Hi. Have you seen the film by Kieslowski, a short film about killing?
No, I haven't.
Second question is, I have some problems with the flashbacks because they became a bit of mysterious to me. Could you tell me a little about your thoughts with the work with them? The flashback in black and white.
Well, reading the book, one of the scenes that really stuck out for me was a recollection she had of Helen had of her childhood and beating a possum with a bunch of other kids and killing a possum. And when I read that in the book, it seemed to me a very important scene, and I came to understand why later, in that in doing a film that is much about a relationship and talking, scenes of two people talking, it seemed very necessary, since this is a film and not a play, to be able to go outside of it into her mind and into her imagination and into her fears. And her perceptions of what the murder is change as the movie goes. So at first I wanted to represent Matthew's story, what his claim is, that he was there but that he didn't do it. And eventually, as the story progresses, the flashbacks become clearer and clearer to when at the end you see the truth.
Question for Mr. Robbins. First, I wanted to say I was I think like most people, very moved by your film. And I thought that the real achievement of the film, and one of the achievements, was to develop, if not a sympathy, then an understanding for a murderer. And I wondered to what degree, especially given the fact that the majority of death row inmates in the U.S. are African Americans, to what degree do you feel that developing that understanding for this character was in some degree dependent on his whiteness?
I didn't really think about that. I thought more about his poverty than about his whiteness. You know, the overwhelming majority of death row inmates are from poor backgrounds and could not afford decent and adequate counsel. I think we've seen with this very famous trial that happened in the United States that it's a great deal about how much you can afford as far as what kind of justice you're going to get. In a way, you know, it's also reflective of what was in the book. You know, it's two white people that she dealt with on death row. But it hadn't crossed my mind in that way.
Mr. Robbins, in private, it wouldn't be possible for me to ask anything right after the screening of this beautiful film, moving film. And doing my job, I want to know, is it a coincidence that you, both films you directed, started in the United States in the years of election? And the second question is, what are the reactions in your country to this film? Thank you.
It is a coincidence. I hadn't thought about it being an election year. It wasn't a coincidence with the first one. I definitely planned for that one to come out in an election year. The reactions have been overwhelming. I don't think there's anything I could have done to prepare for it. First of all, there's an audience for it. And they keep coming, and it's crossed over into beyond the cities, into the malls, and there seems to be a real need to see this movie. Helen's can tell you a couple things that have happened that are way beyond any awards or critical acclaim that have happened to her personally. That for me, really, kind of talk to the possibility of film. You want to tell them about that woman in Louisiana?
Yeah, well, I mean, I gave a talk about a week ago in New Orleans, and a woman stood up at the end of it, and she said, "I just want to let you know that my daughter was killed several years ago, and my family has been really torn up over this because some of us are not for the death penalty and some of us are. And especially my two other daughters. One has been to see the film twice, another has been to see the film 3 times, and it is really helping us deal with our own feelings and how we want to sort this thing out. And I want to thank you that they did a film of your book." Another dynamic that's happened, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, right in the thick of the death belt in Louisiana. Last Thursday night, an invitation sent out for whoever wants to come and discuss the film. Normally, you'd get 25 people to come discuss the death penalty, and most of them would be people already against the death penalty looking for a little support. Over 200 people filled the room. They were standing against the wall, and normally I have to take people through the whole experience and really bring them through it because they say, yeah, well, what about the victims, and what about this, and what about that? None of those questions surfaced. What people were saying was, in that scene where the family of Matthew Ponsel had visited him, was it really like that? The film gave everybody the experience, so they came in as equal players for the discussion, which has never been able to happen before, because people are so deprived of the experience. And then, of course, people are coming out of the theater and they're buying the book. I mean, who would have... But I mean, this book, who would say that a book that deals with the death penalty could be a bestseller in the United States? People generally avoid books like that like the plague. It makes you think, it makes you feel things, you know, and so it's like that dynamic is, I say to Tim all the time, the movie plows the ground and the book tills the soil. And with those two dynamics, we can really have a change in consciousness in our country.
You're also going to have a lot of rich nuns because the profits.
Yeah, we loaded.
Profits from this book go to her order. So.
Don't you believe that? About being rich.
Two brief questions. First of all, what was your cooperation before the film or during the shooting with the parents of the victim as portrayed in the film, and what was their reaction afterwards? And then also I would like to know, there is in the film, in this particular case, you're giving the film says that early on the inmate gives an interview, television or radio or whatever interview, where he says all these outrageous things about Hitler and whatnot. Did this actually take place? Is it actually possible for somebody on death row to just have, these kind of interviews? If that is the case, how is that possible? Thank you.
That did take place. That's in the book. They do interview death row inmates. After that interview, they cut off interviews with him. But he did say those things, and he did talk about bombing federal buildings. That was long before Oklahoma City. So, it's not, I didn't write anything in this movie to be trendy or, just to update it. It was all in the book. Regarding your first question, I haven't had any contact with the parents. I didn't feel it was necessary for me to do this, mainly because there's plenty of information in the book, and there's plenty of information in documentaries and interviews with these actual people that I watched for me to do my research. For me to go knock on their door, I think is irresponsible. I think it's basically my own indulgence, my own ego saying, I need to research this fully. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go talk to them, take them through their pain again from my, ego. I just didn't want to have anything to do with that.
Just follow up. Isn't that the same what the situation was with the sister who also didn't go and who also didn't want to speak with them beforehand, and then they came back and said, why didn't you speak with us?
No, they're two separate things. One is a real life experience with real people. One is a movie, we have a responsibility, I'm sorry, to, we don't have to put these people through that again. It's there in the book. It's there in documentaries, it's plenty of information.
And another factor, too, is that the murder victims' families are composite. It isn't those people. And I think if Tim had gone to the Harveys who are real or the LeBlancs who are real and said, look, we're thinking of doing a movie of this book, first of all, he would have opened himself to first the identification of the movie's about you. So tell me what really happened, and then you would have to be bound to that. And what would his responsibility, besides the thing of just bringing them through the pain, then what are you going to do with that? What if you decide that you're going to move the film in a certain direction? Or you now have a responsibility to them because they told you this happened, and then would they have that expectation? So I think that would have been a wrong move to do. In real life, I made the mistake of not approaching the murder victim's family soon enough. And what I love about this film is it shows me in my humanness and my vulnerability and making mistakes, because that was really what happened. And the audience and people can follow that kind of story, like, hey man, this nun's in over her head here, and she's making all kinds, she doesn't know who she's dealing with, and she then can become the one that they follow into the story.
Mr. Robbins, hi, I'm over here. I wonder if you are aware of a problem, I think, of the film that could be, from a certain point, also be regarded as an explanation or a justification for death penalty from a theological point of view. For centuries, the Church has attended the whole ritual of official dying, whether in war or in peace. And in the moment when the prisoner confesses, he is saved in a theological sense. And so, therefore, it doesn't matter if he lives or dies. If he would have changed his trial, or if he had changed his sentence to a life imprisonment, he would never have felt that thing, and he would never have been saved. Therefore, from that point, it could also be said that this film justifies death penalty in a dangerous way, I think.
Well, first of all, who are you to say that that never would happen if he had been given a life sentence? I mean, are you God?
In your film, this happens when he faces death, and therefore it could be said that this has something to do with...
well, it could be said. It could also be said that if he had been given life at some point, he would have come around to accepting responsibility for his actions. Certainly the implications of what you're suggesting is that in order to save people, a good amount of torture will produce a desired effect. So why don't we do it to all prisoners, Go out and torture them a little bit until they are so... naked of emotion and soul that they admit their guilt. I'm personally not into that sadism,
May I speak French?
Certainly.
Sorry. Ça va être plus précis. Vous avez fait allusion tout à l'heure au contrat qui ne devrait pas dépasser les 2 heures.
contract about a film not exceeding 2 hours. Now you can imagine that it wasn't easy to put a film together like this with 2 characters on this subject.
Aux États-Unis maintenant.
In the States these days.
Qu'est-ce que vous aviez le droit de faire?
So what were you able to do? What did you have the right to do? And what were you not able to do? How did you work on the screenplay as well? Was there anything that you were forbidden to do? What were your strong points that you proceeded from in the script? Can you tell us more about that?
Well, I have a deal with Working Title Polygram that basically gives them a first look at everything I write, and at which point they can we can present them with a budget, and they can either reject it or accept it. With this particular film, we had a certain budget, and at that point, that was unacceptable to them at that particular budget. So we did take it around to Hollywood. Pretty much all the studios, and were rejected by every single one of them. For whatever reason, it was certainly not a film Hollywood wanted to do. So at that point, we took, the principals involved all took salary cuts in order to get it done with Polygram. Now, that being said, Polygram, after that point, was absolutely hands-off as far as what I wanted to do with the film. Totally let me do what I wanted to do, cut it the way I wanted to cut it. Did not ever once tell me that a certain thing could not be in the film. Never tried to dictate artistically anything about the film.
Yeah.
Ich hätte eine Frage. Sie hatten gesagt,
I got a question.
die Finalszene,
You said that the final
das ist
scene
alles Fiktion.
was basically
Aber trotzdem möchte ich
fiction.
konkret fragen, ob
But
die Familien
let me ask you
dabei waren
whether the families
während der
were actually
Hinrichtung.
present during the execution.
Und eine zweite Frage
And
wäre,
my second question,
haben Sie Reaktionen von Seiten der Familien
did you get any
oder der Familie
reactions
der
from the
Hingerichteten
victims'
bekommen? Gab
families
es ein
or
Feedback
the family of the
diese Seite?
inmate who was executed? Did you have any feedback from either of those quarters?
What was it? The first part of the question was.
Were the victims really there?
Yes, they were really there.
Yes. Der erste Teil der Frage, ja.
The first part of the question was
ob die Familien
whether the families of
beantwortet. Sie waren da.
Sie waren da. Die Familie waren dabei.
yes, they were there, right? Confirm that? Yes.
Yeah, the families were there. And no, I have not received any letters or phone calls from the actual victims' families.
Well, out of many questions here and out of your answer, I'd like to point once again in all of them that is both writer and director. They wanted to expose facts as they are, but not to take sides. This is the first question. And the second is for both of you: do you see religion, whatever religion, as a solution to this end of the millennium? Thank you.
What do you mean? I don't get that question.
Um,
What does she mean by? What do you mean by a solution to the end of the millennium?
What in a way the film meant. To the problems we have of the 20th century, you know, and the second millennium, it's finishing with us.
Oh, so does the film
So if
point out
religion
direction?
is, if you want, I can quote André Malraux, a French philosopher, but I won't quote him, who said, as everybody knows what he said. Well, but this is a question. If you see religion, whatever religion, as a solution to the problems of the end of the millennium, but before I'd like you to ask that this was your intention, to be accurate to the facts, but not take sides. Because in my view, as a film critic, and I've seen many American movies that take sides, usually you don't. Thanks.
Yeah. It was important that we not make judgments on either side, that we not treat either the criminal or the victim's families with disrespect, and that we treat everyone as human beings. Also, it was very important for us not to try to manipulate the audience into liking this guy because he's innocent or because he's charming. I felt it would have been a lie and a bit of a cheat to do that. You know, at the end of this road, you know, you ultimately have to make up your own mind on this. And I think that's the best thing a film can do. It's, you know, it's hard to do. It's easier to do, you know, propaganda. And it would have, but I don't think if you lead an audience down that road, I don't think you really fundamentally change anything or even raise an intelligent question in their brain. You just give them candy for the night, and the next day they'll change right back. As far as the millennium, I'm going to have to leave that one up to you.
Religion, the way it's presented in this film, is you notice that there is a conflict in the priest who represents more institutional religion. Sister, your job is to go in, get this man to receive the sacraments before he dies, and that's it, plain and simple. And my struggle with that is not what redeems human beings, to put some kind of formula on them, but what redeems us all is love and care and dignity that can allow us to come to truth even about ourselves. The thing about being saved is not simply somebody confesses their sins and now they're ready to go to God. What saves us is honesty and truthfulness and love and compassion over against hate and bitterness and hurting other people. As Susan, Sister Helen, says to him, Matthew, you know, your redemption isn't a question of like getting a free circus ticket. Jesus died for your sins and you get the free ticket and you get to go in. You got to participate in your own redemption. I think it shows depths of what spirituality is about. that, yeah, we do need for the next millennium.
I'm down here. I've got actually two questions for Mr. Robbins. The first question is, you and Susan have very strong views on a lot of controversial subjects. What happens when you disagree? Do you hash them out to find one voice, or do you agree to disagree?
We're allowed to disagree with each other.
Okay.
Yes.
The second question is, I was talking to Susan a few months ago about reincarnation, and she said that she'd be very surprised if she hadn't known her children in a previous life. How do you feel about reincarnation?
Well, you know, when you look into when you look at a baby that's just been born to you, you see a person, and so you got to believe to a certain extent that, you know, there's a lot you can do to guide the child. There's a lot you can do to help and to nurture and to love the child. But they are specifically different people than their brothers and sisters. And they're that way from birth. So, you know what I mean? There's something that's fully formed from the start. I can see the difference in my two sons. One is very athletic and, you know, aggressive, and the other is very, you know, contemplative and much more, you know, into language. And there's nothing we did that made them that way, you know. So I do, to a certain extent, I do believe that children choose us, you know.
Congratulations to both of you. I have a question for Mr.
Hello.
Hi. Given your views on violence committed by the state, what is your reaction to the recent win by Mr. Buchanan in the New Hampshire primary, given his views of violence committed by the state?
Oh, boy. Well, you know, he's going to make it entertaining. He's got a lot of skeletons in his closet. Oh, well, you know, name the militia, you know. I don't know. I know the guy scares me a little bit. I don't think he can, you know, win. If he does win, maybe it's hastening the realization in America of something deeply ugly about ourselves, you know, who knows. I don't think we'll ever elect him. I think there's too many good people in America to elect a person like that.
I hope you're right.
One question about your procedure in this film. In Robert Roberts, you also played the main role and directed. This is the first we were just directed. How did you feel? Did you ever want to go to Champagne and say, "Let me do this"? And how was it? Not able to act.
A pleasure, because I approached Sean very early on after I wrote my first draft of it, and I never contemplated playing it. There's too many challenges in directing it. And I didn't have a real fix on the character either, which is different than Bob Roberts, because I've been living with that character for 5 years, and I knew exactly how I wanted it done. So, you know, it didn't mean as much to me.
Mr. Robbins, thank you for the great film, but there's also a great soundtrack in your film, but only a few songs are included, like the Bruce Springsteen tune. First question, did you ask the musicians like Tom Waits, Lyle Lovett, Susan Vega to write a song about this issue? And why didn't you put them into the movie or a bit more?
Well, when I had a rough cut of the film, I sent it out to some singers, songwriters that I really admire. Songwriters that write, you know, songs that don't have hooks, you know, that write real songs. And a couple of them I had known. I'd met Tom Waits on Shortcuts, and I had met Lyle on The Player. And I sent out the film and said, basically, you know, without any expectations, if you feel inspired to write something, go ahead. I'd love to have it, and we're putting together this other album. I never was my intention to put songs in the movie. What happened whenever you heard a lyric in the middle of this movie was that it seemed like the filmmaker was trying to tell you what to think or feel at that particular moment. And one of the things that we've been, struggling from the start of writing was to make sure that each person in the audience is allowed their own experience throughout. And lyrics kind of guide you down a road. Plus, you didn't have any scenes, that Sister Helen goes into a bar and the jukebox is playing, and or the, honky-tonk dance scene, But anyway, they were very, very generous. I find musicians to be extraordinarily generous and very, incredibly talented. These people that came up with songs.
A question to Sister Prejean again. One of the really surprising and sad things in the movie is the breaking up of the marriage of the Delacroix. Now, you mentioned families breaking up because they had different opinions on the death penalty. Now, what are more possible reasons to break up? Since, if it's true that about 70% do break up after a thing like this is unbelievable. Why? Do you know?
It's not so much disagreeing about the death penalty per se, but it's grieving over a lost child and both of them dealing with their grief. Whatever fault lines are in the marriage, the death of a child is so extremely difficult to, like he mentioned in the film, she wanted to give the clothes to Goodwill. One wants to keep the clothes of the child. One wants to celebrate the anniversary of the death. One doesn't. Whatever fault lines are in that marriage are pulled to the breaking point. And it's not per se that they disagree about the death penalty, but how do you grieve the loss of a child? And that's an example. That was a composite character there. And but I found that out at a Parents of Murdered Children support group when people were telling the stories, and how many of them said, we've broken up now. She has a different way of dealing with it from me. And then that's how I found out how common it was.
J'ai deux questions pour la sœur Prejean. Je voudrais savoir,
question, I'd like to know,
en premier lieu, si vous
first of all,
avez
I'd like to
reçu
know whether you received
de demandes de condamnés à mort pour les assister pendant ce temps, après surtout d'avoir écrit votre livre.
Whether after having written the book, whether people wrote to you in any way, sort of hate letters or about your views on this subject, and also given the Church's view on the death penalty.
Par exemple, si concret comme dans le cas de l'avortement.
I wonder if it is as strict as it is in the case of abortion, for example. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? Thank you.
First of all, do I get hate letters? Yes, sometimes I do get hate letters. I have a file that I keep called Ardent Foes. Sometimes, just recently, after the film came out, a woman sent me an article about a child who had been killed, and she scribbled across the top of the page, may you burn in hell for wanting to hold a murderer's hand. Look at the death of this child. For the most part, the book has generated letters from all over the country, all different, not even just this country, because HarperCollins has published the book in the UK and will be reissuing the book. For the most part, the letters are people go, the most common thing is, I had no idea it was like this. Many people saying, it changed my mind on the death penalty. I just didn't know it was like this. The other about the stance of the church. You're right in comparing it with the abortion issue. U.S. Catholic bishops, in fact, many bishops in different countries have taken stands against the death penalty. But I find they have not put much moral leadership into educating the people in the pews. There are some disturbing polls that show in the United States, first, that Catholics support the death penalty more than Protestants and more than Jews, and the other is that the more people go to church, the more they believe in the death penalty. I mean, that's very disturbing to me of what, like Tim was addressing, of what religion can do or what kind of idea it feeds of God who wants pain for pain and life for life and pound of flesh for pound of flesh. What's going on here? The Pope recently came out with his strongest statement ever about that we need that it now with modern institutions and penal situations, we have an alternative to the death penalty, and the state doesn't need to take life. But he left the loophole. He left the loophole, and he said, but in cases of absolute necessity. And the Catholic district attorney in New Orleans seized on these words already of the Pope and said, we don't get enough death penalties in this city. We only do it for absolute necessity. And I think the Pope's words there, because he didn't take a strong, uncompromised stand, leaves a loophole, and people quote his words to be on the side of the death penalty. We need moral leadership. The death penalty is very much a poor person's issue. And I find that to the extent that leaders have a passion for the poor, they understand this issue and speak out on it. But you look at the parish churches, it is very rare to have a priest from the pulpit speak about the death penalty. It's very controversial. They leave it alone. The collections go down. People get mad at them and say we're not coming to church here anymore. So the passion for the poor and the issue of justice has to be strong for them to do that. And I don't know how far along we are with that. There are some steps moving in the right direction in this. But when the Pope has come to our country, he's never visited death row. He's never spoken out against the death penalty. Now, Mother Teresa, she did. She went to San Quentin, went on to death row, and poked the guard in the chest and said, remember what you do to these men, you do to Christ. I mean, she was pretty clear. But the Pope never has. And I find it's just very much an issue of the poor and social justice, and it requires that you be there and know what's going on so that you can have a passion for it.
Mr. Robbins, there is a dedication in the end of the movie, including a Robbins name. I guess it's your son or nephew, something like that. Is there anything personal? First thing I thought was maybe somebody's killed in your family, and that's why you...
Yeah, no, it's my grandfather who died while I was making Shawshank Redemption, and my grandmother from my mother's side. And both of them helped me out a great deal when I was going to college in Los Angeles with places to stay and loans for food to eat. So I owe them a great debt, and to a certain extent they bring religion from 2 points of view into my family's life. You know, my grandmother was a devout Catholic, and my grandfather was he grew up in Washington State, so his parents were pioneers and trailblazers, and he has a kind of frontier decency where, you know, you treat a man well, he'll treat you well kind of thing. And, you know, I think I'm a combination of the two.
Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Sister Prejean. Thank you, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you.